Welcome back to Kansas City Real Talk, brought to you by KCRAR. I'm Alex Gehring, and you are not going to want to miss our interview today. Today, we are bringing in Kyle Talbot. He is the founder of Kansas City Scene. If that sounds vaguely familiar, it's because he is in your algorithm probably almost every single day with content about Kansas City and what is going on in our hometown. Also, he is a realtor and the founder of the Moving to KC team. You probably don't know much about Kyle, but you're going to learn a lot today. Let's find out how these two separate businesses work together to create a lead driving machine for Kyle and his team, but also how he's able to provide value to thousands in Kansas City every single day. Let's go get Kyle. Kyle Talbot, welcome to Kansas City Real Talk. I'm so glad to see you. When you walked in, I said to you, you look exactly like your videos. You do. I've never met you before. I've heard your voice so many times. I've learned more about my own city from you than from my own exploration. And I think that's probably true of so many people. Tell us how you started this journey. How did you, did real estate come first, or did content creation come first?
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to hear that the camera doesn't add 10 pounds like, they've said in showbiz. But no, real estate came first. So I actually got licensed in November of 2022, and my background is sales and marketing. And after I got licensed, the first thing that I told my broker that I wanted to do was 30 posts in 30 days on my Instagram page to kind of backlog some content and make it look like I'm not a new agent. And I just fell in love with it. So after that month, I was like, I think content is how I want to grow my business. And so I just kind of went down the rabbit hole of what that would look like and launched my YouTube channel in January of 2023. So less than 2 months after I got licensed.
And that's wild to me because it feels like you've been doing this for a really long time. Truly, like I feel like I've been seeing your videos pop up in my algorithm for much longer than just a few years. You said you were in marketing before. What was that role?
So I've actually held many roles. I didn't go to college, so I'm an only child of a single mother. And as soon as I got out of high school, I was like, man, I just want to get into the workforce. So coincidentally, I actually went into being just a general laborer. I worked at a warehouse, like picking orders. And one day my mom came home and she was like, hey, I ran into my sister's ex-husband at Quick Trip, and he owns a roofing company. And he's looking for sales guys that want to go out and knock doors. And I was laying epoxy floors at the time, and it was like the worst job I've ever had. And I was like, I'll do anything. And so there was a hailstorm in Lee Summit that year. It was a big storm. It was 2006. And he brought me in. His son worked for him as a sales manager. He trained me on their little pitch book and how to knock doors and what to say, and turned me loose. And so there was one vivid memory I have of we found a really good block that hadn't been hit by other roofing contractors, because when a storm hits, and this was 20 years ago, it's even worse now, but after a storm hits, you'll get like the storm chasers that come in town. Right. And we found this like killer street that hadn't been hit yet, and we were getting on, like every door we knocked, we were getting on the roof. And I just remember I call him my uncle, but he's really my aunt's ex-husband. But he's just like driving along next to me as I'm walking down the street, and then as soon as I knock on a door and get somebody, he'd hop out and grab the ladder, and we'd be up there. And this was before all the technology they have today.
Drones,
and we would like,
yeah,
because like Eagle View's a technology now that just does like the sketch of the roof, but we were like sketching it by hand, like up there on the roof, like counting, doing all the measurements. Again, I didn't go to college, but I had to like learn how to get the square footage of like a trapezoid and stuff like that. And we would just work with their insurance adjuster, get them a new roof, and they pay at the time it was like $250 deductible.
Yeah.
Kind of goes to show how times have changed, because that's impossible to get anymore.
In that industry.
Yeah, they're like all percentage deductibles now. But so that's how I cut my teeth, and I did that for a couple of years. And then 2008 hit, and we didn't get a hailstorm. Coincidentally, it's much harder to sell a roof to somebody that insurance isn't paying for it, especially in a financial crisis. And so I pivoted, and I actually got a job at a call center. So it was an inside sales job, and it was selling leads to contractors, which I was just inherently good at because I had just worked for a contractor.
Yeah.
And so I just knew the lingo, and it was actually called, in 2008, it was called Service Magic, and they rebranded a few years later to Home Advisor, and then most recently they bought Angie's List and they rebranded under one umbrella of Angie. But I did that for 5 years. I managed a team of 12 inside salespeople at the kind of tail end of my career there. And then I got back into roofing sales in Denver when I moved out there. So that's kind of been like my history of sales. And then in between that, I worked some like construction jobs, and I worked for a home remodeler. I did hardwood floors. And so like when I got into real estate at 36, I was like, man, all of the skills that I've accumulated in my career were kind of like leading to this moment, I think, because not only am I, kind of good at marketing and sales, and which you have to be, and I've done 1099 sales positions for a long time, but I know like the inner workings of a home too. So I can walk in and kind of look at it from a contractor's eyes and be like, the mechanicals are old, the roof's going to need to be replaced, the foundation is shot, those sorts of things, which really serves me well in my clients.
When you moved to Denver, how long were you in Denver for?
2011 to 2020.
So 9 years. When you came back, what was your moving experience like?
We bought a house sight unseen.
Sight unseen, yeah.
So kind of backtracking a little bit, but I moved to Denver in 2011. I met my wife in Kansas City in 2013 while I was living in Denver. And we dated long distance for about 8 months before I convinced her to move out there. We had 2 boys. They're Colorado native boys. And in 2020, after the pandemic, we came back one summer, and our boys were 4 and 2, and we were with all their cousins, and we were just like, well, me more so than my wife, but I was like, man, we should move back to Kansas City. And so that was like August of 2020, and in September we listed our house in Arvada, Colorado. We had 38 showings and 16 offers in one weekend. It was like the height of the frenzy in Denver, and went under contract immediately, $50,000 over asking. And my wife actually went to school with the real estate agent that we found in Kansas City, Mary Beth Schwartz. She's been like an amazing mentor for me. But anyway, we came to Kansas City. We kind of identified that we wanted to live in Brookside. And this house came on the market when we were back in Colorado. I sent it to Mary Beth. She went over and did a video tour. We wrote an offer and went under contract that day. I flew in for the inspection, and the rest was history. So that process of like doing a cross-state relocation really informed kind of how I created content initially out the gate, because it was more catered to that type of buyer, right? A relocation client, because it is different than any other buyer experience. Like half of the buyers that we've represented have bought houses that way, with us just going and doing a virtual tour and then them putting in an offer, and sometimes flying in for the inspection, sometimes not. Sometimes they don't step foot in the house until after closing, which is a lot of pressure to put on somebody, like I'm kind of always holding my breath when they step in the house, be like, do you really like this?
Of course.
But because I went through that experience, and, I kind of worked through that process, it's, again, really helped us as we've, built systems and processes for buyers who are making huge moves from sometimes like California, Florida, New York.
It's a lot easier to authentically create a channel called Moving to KC if you recently moved to KC.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, it's that's makes so much sense now that that's part of your journey. So when did you start creating content then? Did you? I understand that real estate came first. We talked a little bit about this before we started, but when did you start to create content, and when did that start to take off?
Yeah. So again, I got licensed in November 2022, and then I immediately started making short form content for Instagram. And it really started, again, referencing my wife. She has a social media presence as well. And she had recently had a few pieces of content that just like blew up. And overnight, she went from like, a couple thousand followers to 50,000 followers. And I was like, wow. I was like, there's some merit to this. Maybe I could do this for my business. And, I've seen other real estate agents do like home tours and stuff like that. So that's really how I got started. You would reach out to an agent who had a listing and be like, hey, do you mind if I feature your listing on my page? I'll give you credit, get a lot of no's. But, now it's funny because, we still do home tours and I get agents that reach out to me and like, hey, will you feature my house on your page to get it more exposure? But anyway, I started doing just home tours and like market update type content. So I was really just kind of focused on, buyers and sellers. Like I was making content just for them. And then simultaneously, I started my YouTube channel, which again was more focused on relocation clients. So I was doing two different styles of content at once, which makes it a little more challenging, especially because we've kind of maintained doing that through the entire time that I built my business. But the YouTube content was more like pros and cons of moving to Kansas City, neighborhood tours, like getting out and doing vlogs in Overland Park and, different parts of the metro to show people what it's really like to live there. While I was doing all of that, I was actually still selling for my cousin's roofing and siding business. And so, there was this aha moment for me. The brokerage that I started out with had a holiday party. So I got licensed November 2022. In December, they had their holiday party. And I remember going around and talking to all these agents. And what I came away with was everybody does something different in real estate. You know, like one person owned a property management company. Another agent only worked with commercial clients. Another agent was like, just a full-time, residential agent. And then you had somebody that had a team. And I was like, wow, I could really, do what I wanted, whatever I want to do. And so I was like, what do I want to do? And it was content. And so, it took me, I started making YouTube videos in January of 2023. I didn't sell my first house from YouTube until September of 2023. So it took me 9 months of posting content consistently before I got a single client from social media.
You said the word consistently. What did consistently mean at that time? How frequently were you putting out content?
So it's pretty much the same as it is now. We post a YouTube video every week, Friday at 5 o'clock, and we post on Instagram every day. And the Instagram content has really evolved, and we can get into that here, I'm sure. But when I started out doing real estate-only content, there was this moment in April of 2023, and that was the year that there was a big event in Kansas City that year. Do you remember what it was?
No.
April of 2023.
April of 2023. I don't.
The NFL draft.
The NFL draft. There you go.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a sports guy.
Yeah.
Anybody that knows that I don't know. I remember that happened. I remember it was a big deal, but I couldn't tell you anything about the NFL really.
It was a huge deal. And so I had this idea because, part of doing content creation is like looking at other creators that you look up to and kind of seeing what they do. And there's an agent in Orlando, Ken Pozek, who is a mega agent. I mean, he has a 50-person team, and he is like the GOAT when it comes to making content and doing it in a way where it's not like obviously real estate related, right? Like he's talking about developments, what's coming to Orlando, theme parks, like all of these things. And so again, kind of looking at his page, I was like, I'm going to make a video about some of the developments that are happening in Kansas City on my YouTube channel. And then I'm also going to mention the NFL draft. And I didn't realize how big of an idea that was until I posted it on Monday, the week of the draft. And on Wednesday, the algorithm picked it up because it was like, one of the only pieces of long form content about Kansas City in the NFL draft. And I remember that Sunday I was like sitting on my porch hanging out with a buddy, and I looked at my analytics for that video, and I had like 3,000 views, which was the most views that I'd ever had on a YouTube video since I started. I was like, oh my God, I am like a big time YouTube creator now. And that video went on to get like 50,000 views, and it was so bad. I mean, it was just so bad because, you know, I was only 4 months into making content. I wasn't as good on camera as I am now. And but it really opened my eyes to this bigger vision of like making content just real estate focused is so narrow, you know, because out of everybody that lives in Kansas City, what percentage of those people are going to buy or sell a house that year? I think on average we see like 40,000 transactions for the Heartland MLS every year, more or less. And there are 2.5 million people or so that live in the metro. So it is such a small fraction of the people that live here. But at some point, people who aren't buying and selling will become buyers and sellers. Mm-hmm. And so the aha for me was like, I need to go like just widen my funnel and make more just generalized content about Kansas City because nobody's doing that right now. Like Penway Point, for instance, was one of the first videos that I did on Instagram that blew up for me, and it was the Ferris wheel, and the rest of that development has kind of fizzled out, which is funny because I've been reporting on it for 4 years now. But I did a video.
You play some good mini golf there.
Yeah, but the vision of that development is amazing. If they could execute on it, and it's so sad. But anyway, I did a short form piece of content, and it's like a Ferris wheel's coming to downtown Kansas City. And that was my hook for the video, and that video ended up getting like 100,000 views. And so it was at that moment that I pivoted from making only real estate content on Instagram to focused more on development, what's coming to Kansas City, and that even has evolved over time to more just kind of like news-related content, events, stories that are worth telling in Kansas City. I always tell people that we really just try and focus on everything except for crime and politics on our media channel, and kind of keep it positive because, I'm an optimist, right? I think that served me well as a salesperson. The first tattoo I ever got it says ambition. It's on the back of my arm. So it's like I'm driven. I'm, try to see everything glass half full. And so I was like, I'm really excited about the trajectory of Kansas City. Like, we just had the draft. We have all these cool projects that are going on. Let's talk about it. Yeah. And it just blew up, and so going back to your original question, I try to post a talking head reel every day on Instagram, and then we kind of started layering in like these headline posts and carousels and stuff like that. So I think on Instagram now we post 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, and then we're still consistently doing one long form video on my main YouTube channel once a week. But the vision is to have 3 or 4 YouTube channels in different categories.
Yeah. So then when you make that one YouTube video for the week, do you use that long form content and chop it into shorter form content to use for shorts or for stories or?
Sometimes. Not very often, actually. And this is one of the things that, looking back, if I would have done it differently, it would have been a more cohesive across-the-board type of execution, because my YouTube content is still geared towards people who are relocating. It has evolved into, I still do like once every other month, I'll do like just a long form video on developments that are coming to Kansas City. And sometimes it'll be just one single video on a singular development. Like I've done one on Berkeley Riverfront Park and kind of the whole vision of that, the West Bottoms redevelopment. Mm-hmm. I did one on the South Loop project, Luminary Park. And then I'll do these videos that are like, here are 5 developments you need to know about that are coming to Kansas City. Those videos translate better to our short form content than like, here are 7 things you need to know if you're considering moving to Kansas City.
Gotcha.
Like that just doesn't really fit the brand of what we do short form wise. So I made it really difficult on myself.
Yeah.
And so not only am I recording a long form YouTube video every week, but I'm shooting 4 to 5 to 6 pieces of short form content individually. And then occasionally we'll be able to layer in, like yesterday we posted one that was a clip from one of my YouTube videos on Riverside because there are a couple of developments that are going on up there. And it really fit the mold of what we're doing on Instagram. But long story short, no. We don't get to repurpose as much of my content as I wish we could.
Well, I love this because I can see how passionate you are about what you do. That said, you've created something that is a little bit, you've scaled it, but it's a little bit taxing to scale.
Yes.
And that said, how often does this feel like a grind to you?
It's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. It's another full-time job.
Yeah.
You've got multiple full-time jobs. Do you ever reach a point with it where, and I'm sure that the answer is, this feels like such an obvious question, because I know what my answer would be personally. Does it ever feel like it's hard to come up with what that Friday video is going to be? And do you ever sometimes feel like you're phoning it in, or what's that feel like?
Yes. And this is why it's so hard. And I think it's going to be difficult for people to build a business in the way that I have.
Yeah.
Because I had the benefit of building my systems around content creation before I ever got busy with real estate. I had an agent reach out to me yesterday on Facebook and was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel, but she's 6 years into the business. She's got a really healthy business. And honestly, I made a lot of decisions up front that really make little sense on paper. And I remember explaining what I was trying to do before I sold a single piece of real estate from content to people. And they just kind of look at me like, sure, yeah, I'm sure that's going to work out for you. But some of the hires that I made along the way are more content focused than real estate focused. My full-time business operations manager, she spends probably 10 to 15% of her time on the real estate side and the rest of it on the media side of the business. And then in August of last year, I hired a full-time videographer and editor. And so that's a lot of overhead with just 2 hires that really aren't focused on the real estate side of the business. However, the media company feeds the real estate business.
Right.
And so it makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And frankly, in order to scale it to this level, you have to have the right people in place to help you execute, because the reality is I get so busy with real estate now that it's hard for me to continue being as consistent on my social media posts. But I have 2 buyer's agents. And so those buyer agents, when I get too busy, I start handing off, and they're in the lead rotation, so they get leads as well. And so it's been like, I remember a year in, I started listening to the real estate, the $1 Million Real Estate Agent book by Gary Keller.
Yeah.
And I only listened to half of it because that's how I do audiobooks. Like, I'm so all over the place. But the reason I stopped listening to it is because I was intuitively building my business the way that he was explaining. It just looked a little different, because in that book, they don't really lay out the fact that you are going to run a media company alongside a real estate company.
But it does lay out the proper hires to make at the right times very clearly.
Yeah, exactly. And so our infrastructure of our team right now is I have a full-time virtual assistant, I have a full-time director of operations, I have a full-time videographer, and those 3 people spend way more time on content than on real estate. And then I have a part-time director of operations for the real estate business. I have a transaction coordinator. I have 2 buyer's agents. And so I came into this business with the intention of, I've been trying to get out of sales for 6 years. In 2018, I started a roofing company in Denver. So I got back into selling roofing in like 2015 after I got married. And 3 years later, I started my own company. And then in 2020, I moved to Kansas City, so I kind of dissolved it. But the purpose of starting that company is like I'm like so tired of doing day-to-day sales activity that I was like, I'm just going to start a business. I'm getting enough leads. So eventually I'll just have a team of salespeople that are running my leads and I could just manage the business. And that's really been the vision coming into real estate. Like my intention was to get into real estate so I could get out of sales.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense to many people, but it's starting to kind of look, I can see it 5 years from now. I could see myself stepping out and just focused more on doing content full time. Because the reality is I enjoy doing content more than I enjoy doing the real estate side of my business, which is the secret sauce.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think I've had people give me feedback that it's obvious to them that I enjoy doing it. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people because most people don't enjoy making content. So in order to scale it to this level, you have to be super consistent and put the people and systems in place to be able to execute. And you have to love doing it. Because if you don't love doing it, you're not going to be able to sustain it because it's a lot of work. Like you said, it's a second full-time job.
Absolutely. And to be clear, I think that you're right. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but anybody that did read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller, that's basically what he's telling you to do is get into real estate to get out of sales long term. I mean, that's that is the goal. If you're building a business, that business works for you. I think a lot of what you just said is so important for people to hear because it's very clear that you're not an influencer. You're a real estate, or not a real estate company. You are a media company with a real estate company associated with it. But you're a media company, not just a single one-man influencer type of a situation. That's impossible for somebody to just wake up and decide they're going to do on the cheap alongside their real estate job. And I think it's important that you built both kind of at the same time alongside one another to complement one another too. You made a lot of decisions on the fly, but they all seem to be the right decisions. And it seems like it's worked out really well for you.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, the first thing that I realized when I started making content, because I actually edited my first 3 YouTube videos, and I enjoyed it, but it took so long to do, and they were bad. I'm not an editor, and I was just like, man, if I want to make really good content, I need to outsource this. And I wasn't making any money from real estate, so I was funding my content through the other job that I had, which was selling siding and roofing.
Yeah.
And again, that was a huge risk, and there was some sacrifice that took place because of it. I mean, we had to sell our house in Brookside, which was really, really hard to do because we loved the house and the street and the neighborhood that we were on. But it was a sacrifice that I made because it gave me the runway that I needed to scale the business. And so one of my first hires was just I found an editor on Fiverr, and he started editing all of my content, and it immediately 10x the quality. And so what I realized is you can make up for a lot if you have good editing. And so, and then I've always been scripted because I've had all of these sales and marketing jobs where it's funny, I was listening to the Bortnick interview you did on the way here, and she was talking about how, they use scripts and stuff. That's very much how I personally like to learn how to do sales. And so, through the variety of sales jobs that I've had throughout my career, they've all had some kind of script alongside them. And I think that's really served me in content creation because everything that I do is scripted. And so I write out a full script for, what I've found is to get the length of YouTube video that we need, which is around 13 to 15 minutes long, I need about a 2,400 word script. And so not only am I shooting the content every week, but I have to come up with the idea, and then I have to write the hook and write the entire script, which we lean on AI a lot now to kind of help us, structure that and execute. But there are so many pieces that go into, and you can wing it, right? You can come up with an idea and just like sit down in front of a camera, but that's just not my style, And what I realize is like if I can write a good script and a compelling script, the content is going to be way better because I'm not going to be like, in the middle of a sentence and then completely blank what the point that I'm trying to make and ramble on for the next 5 minutes, which I found myself doing when I wasn't scripted.
Right.
And so it's, again, there are just so many moving pieces that go into making really good content. And I think ultimately what I would like to have is a full-time copywriter who's, writing scripts for me, writing copy for our website and for the descriptions and everything, which will only help boost us even more because, as the world evolves, like SEO has been a thing for the last 2 decades, but now GEO with AI is
Absolutely.
a thing. And so we're like brainstorming how can we come up when you go into ChatGPT and search who's the best real estate agent in Kansas City or, who are the top 5 or whatever. That's kind of what we're aiming for.
So you self-described you have described yourself as an optimist, and I appreciate that. But has there ever been a video that you've made that's been controversial in such a way that you got some angry people coming at you about something that you said? Anything like that before?
Yeah. So the controversial titles perform really well.
Of course. Sometimes it's by design.
Yeah.
Anything that maybe, I guess what I'm more curious about is there anything that was controversial that you weren't expecting to be controversial?
Yeah, what I've realized as I've made a ton of content around development is people in Kansas City hate change.
Of course.
And so like every time I post anything about a development, there's people in the comments that are upset about it or, what should be built there or why are, what incentives are going into this and so on and so forth. And so I just, about a year ago, I was like, I can't read the comments anymore because every single one of my posts has some kind of controversy in the comments. So that's kind of been my, the thing that's kept me sane is to just ignore what people say in the comments and just keep focused on like what's going to be the next piece of content. But one of the things that we've recently kind of switched up because of the way that content creation is going is especially in my short form content, it used to be just like newscasty, like telling people what's happening. But now I've kind of worked into a lot of pieces that I make my opinion on them. And that in itself is controversial because some people will agree with my opinion and half of the people won't.
And you'll tell them that if you don't agree, let you know in the comments.
Right, exactly. Right, yeah. That's kind of like my, my outro for all those videos is like, let me know what you think in the comments. And that drives engagement, right? Which is why we do that. And having an opinion drives engagement. Yeah. So everything is, every decision we make is how can we, get this in front of more of the people that we want to see it. And then ultimately the goal is to, work them through the funnel in a way to where when they're ready to buy or sell real estate, they end up on our webpage or our website, one of the lead magnets or landing pages that we've created, and we have a shot at converting them as a client.
You want them to leave comments, but you don't read them.
Yeah,
I want to know, was there a year ago when you stopped reading the comments, was there a particular comment or exchange that made that click where you were like, I'm not reading the comments anymore. I don't want to do this.
It's just an all-consume when you post as much as we do, and on Instagram right now I have 120,000 followers on the KC Scene, which is like the media brand page. And so when I open up my notification feed and scroll through it, it'll only show me the past 20 minutes because we have so much engagement and there's so many comments. And so I found myself responding to a ton of comments, and then people just want to argue, and you can't convince somebody to side with you or change their mind on social media. That's not the point of it. And so I was just like, I can't do this. I would be consumed all day, every day in exchanges with people if I was reading through every comment. And I should say occasionally one will catch me that I'll reply to and, that sort of thing. But I've had everything from I have gauges, I've had them since I was 18 years old, or maybe it was a little younger than that. And I just decided to keep them in. And I'll still get comments, from people. I saw one a couple of months ago. It was like, I would never work with you because of your gauges. And I'm just like, okay.
Good. Yeah, right. Good. Stay away.
Yeah. So, but what I think is really cool about all of this is that when somebody reaches out, the conversation isn't, tell me your value proposition. It's, I've been watching your channel for a year, and we're ready to make the move. And so I wanted to reach out to see what the next steps would be. And so in so many instances, I don't have to sell myself. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the goal behind investing in this strategy is I've cold called, I've door knocked, I've done everything that you can think of to prospect. And I'm just kind of, when I built my roofing business in Colorado, I went from door knocking to soliciting insurance agents. And so I started going to insurance agents' offices, and then I would be like, hey, my name's Kyle. I work for such and such roofing company. I would love to buy you guys breakfast and tell you a little bit more about who we are. And I would bring, a half a dozen breakfast burritos, and then I had a short 15-minute presentation about what we do, who we, what kind of shingles we install, why that's important. And by the end of it, they were just like, nobody's ever done this for us before. You're absolutely on our list. And so I started doing that in 2017. Or 2016, and May 8th, 2017, Denver had the biggest hailstorm in Colorado history. It was like $2.2 billion. And my phone just started blowing up. And the people who would call me would be like, hey, my insurance agent referred you. I need you to come take a look at my roof. I think we have hail damage. And to me, I was like, oh, my God, this is so much better than knocking doors.
Yeah, yes.
And so when I came to Kansas City and I got my real estate license, I was like, how can I recreate something like that? And that was really, for me, is like, okay, if I can get in front of people and build a relationship with them before I even talk to them, it really brings down that shield of ice. And it's just one less thing that I have to overcome in order to convert them as a client. And so our conversion, especially when I'm working the leads that come in, is so high because, because they're already sold on working with us by the time they reach out. And, I have a client that actually just closed on a house up in Riverside, and he just texted me last Friday. He was like, I watched your latest video, so it's like, it's another way for me to nurture them post-closing too, because
so
it
organic.
Still applies to them, right? Like the content is... It's not just real estate content, it's Kansas City content, and they're hooked. And so as a result, it's like, I don't have to do we do events, and I kind of did it backwards. Like at the beginning of last year, I sat down with an agent that built a team at our office, and I was like, man, we need to get better at our database stuff because I'm doing content, we're getting all these leads, but we're not doing a good job of nurturing them. And so just last year, we started doing events and some drip campaigns and stuff like that. But, posting every day on Instagram and posting every week on, that's nurturing in itself. I'm still in front of them every single day, right? And so I'm top of mind whenever they have somebody to refer or they, have to sell the house that we sold them. So but
they don't always. It doesn't always pan out. How does that feel when that happens? Somebody calls you and says, I love your videos. You changed our trajectory in Kansas City so much so that we found the perfect house that so-and-so sold me last month. Thank you so much. How does that feel when that happens?
It used to affect me more when I was clawing and fighting to build the business.
Those 9 months before it created.
Not even those 9 months. So the first 2 years, because the first year, I sold that first house from YouTube in September. I ended up doing 7 transactions in my first full year of real estate. And then the next year we did 41 transactions. And last year we did 47 transactions, which doesn't sound like a lot more, but we went from 15 million in volume in 2024 to 23 million in volume last year.
There you go.
And so we increased our average price point. And this year we have 21 under contract and closed, and it's the second week of February.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a snowball effect because I have a catalog of over 3 years of content working for me in the background at all times.
Those assets.
And so, there are people at different stages in the process that are going to reach out that haven't reached out yet. And so that used to affect me a lot more than it does today, because I know that we're just, we're going to have way more opportunity because the thing that we have built is going to continue to work regardless, and we're going to continue to get leads and clients from that. And so I don't have to get so caught up in the fact that, somebody decided not to work with us. There are, so many realtors out there where we're not going to get every one, but my goal is what if we could just get 1% of the total transactions that happen every year in the Heartland MLS? That's 400 deals a year.
Yeah.
And if we can do 400 deals a year,
you're fine.
I'll be fine with that. So.
I love it. All right, so I've got one more question about social media for you, and that is, it's kind of a personal one for me. I do not like social media at all. I'm just being honest. Not a big fan of where things are heading with social media. Not a big thing. Not a big fan of what it's done to our attention spans and to the generation that's a little older than my kids. I hope that my kids have an attention span. Like all of these things are going on in my head. And I'm curious, does it ever bother you that and you said, I get it. Does it ever bother you that you have to post on these, you have to post content on these sites that might not necessarily have everybody's best interests in mind? Does that ever bother you at all?
I think it doesn't bother me because I feel like what we're providing is high value content. Mm-hmm. And you hear it all the time in the real estate industry. How can you provide value to your clients? And that's kind of the way I look at what we do. I just had a call the other day, and I had a 45-minute conversation with this woman who moved from Oregon to Michigan. And they've lived in Michigan for 1 year, and they're like, we made a huge mistake. Yeah. And her son lives in Joplin, so they're looking at Kansas City, and she's like, I've just been consuming all of your videos, and I had all of these questions before I found your channel, and you've answered so many of them just through your videos. Yeah. And so when I hear things like that, it's different than, what you're talking about, right? Because people want to know what's going on in Kansas City. If they're moving here, they want to know about the city and how, it works and functions. There are two states, the metro is divided by a state line, which complicates things. Which side makes the most sense for you? And when I look at it through that lens, it doesn't bother me. And then the other part of this is I've always kind of considered myself a creative person, but I've never really had an outlet for it until I discovered content creation. Mm-hmm. And so I feel the same way you do about social media. I don't like the trajectory it's on. And I will say YouTube long form is very different than, the 60-second brain rot reels that we see on, TikTok and Instagram and stuff. And frankly, that's where a lot of our clients come from is YouTube, because long form converts at a higher level than short form. But the short forms, it informs kind of the long form because we can be a more experimental over there because it's just less time invested in it. And if an idea really hits over there, we can be like, oh, okay, this could be a good idea for a longer video. And so we'll do it over here. So it's kind of like a testing grounds too. But I just obsess over it, like in a different way than people obsess over content. Like I am just a nerd when it comes to analytics. And, again, that's kind of my superpower when it comes to building a business this particular way, because I don't think there are a lot of people out there that want to do real estate that also will nerd out in the way that I do about back end analytics about the click through rate and the average view duration and all of these things. And so, at the end of the day, I just want to provide value. And that is kind of like our mission statement is we give tons of value away for free. Mm-hmm. And we ask for nothing in return. But in return, we get clients.
Yep.
And that's just that's the goal.
It speaks for itself.
Like,
absolutely.
It's like all I have to do, this is my one thing, which coincidentally, I read the one thing,
also by Gary Keller.
And Jay Papasan. I read that years before I even considered getting it. I think I read that book in like 2017.
Yeah.
And content creation is my one thing. And so everything that I've done up until this point and the way I built my business is how I can get back time to focus on the one thing that is going to continue to provide for the team and provide for my agents, because not only are we delivering value to the people who consume our content, but I have 2 agents that depend on the business that we get from that content to feed their families, right? And so I'm delivering value there, and I have staff that I'm paying, and I'm delivering value there. And so, I just kind of see it as like this, I don't know, it's this web. The kind of the way that I've envisioned this, and I mentioned earlier that I want to have multiple YouTube channels. And the philosophy behind that is I want whenever you go to YouTube or Google and Google anything about Kansas City in general, that one of our videos pops up, whether it's the Moving to KC channel, the KC Scene YouTube channel, which we're going to do podcasts and feature businesses and kind of like some more newscasty long form stuff, like similar to what we do on Instagram. I have a home tour channel that we're working on. And then I'm actually building a real estate channel, which is just general real estate advice, where if like 7 things you need to know before buying a house.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to create this web, and then Instagram and TikTok and all of those other just kind of layer in where, to your point, I pop up in your feed all the time.
That's right.
I go to First Fridays at the Crossroads and I run into multiple people. It's like, hey man, I love your content.
Yep.
Keep doing what you're doing. And that's what keeps me going.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I think this has been our listeners are going to get a lot out of this. I think everybody has shared one of your videos with a client. That's what I believe is that even realtors are seeing your content and recognizing the value that you're bringing and sharing it with their own clients, sometimes without even realizing that you're an agent.
And that's the point.
But I think that's the point. And again, you're doing that on purpose. It's perfectly okay. You're not asking for anything in return.
I would say that, because when you're looking at your notifications on Instagram, you can see who shares your content in their stories. Mm-hmm. And by and large, the people that share my content the most are realtors.
Yeah.
Because every Friday we do a post on what's going on this weekend in Kansas City, and realtors all day are sharing that because they want to provide value to their clients.
Exactly.
And so we're providing that to agents for free to provide value to their clients.
That's right.
And we're not going to get their clients. You know what I mean? Like the people that we are working with are people who don't have an agent,
Right.
And so...
But that still supports you in terms of the algorithm and how it presents to people that
100%.
Might not be represented.
100%.
Well, you've built a beautiful business. I love what you've done. I love the spirit that you have behind it. And thank you so much for, again, educating me more about my own city than my own exploration could ever really accomplish. I really appreciate everything that you bring to the table here. So
I appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Was there anything today that we should have talked about that we didn't talk about?
I think the one thing I want to leave with people, if you're considering making content, you don't have to do it the way that I did it. I think there are so many ways to make content about something that you're passionate about that will bring more awareness to your own social media and your personal brand. And that's kind of the key, right? Is like, don't be so obvious about, like, the one thing that agents get a bad rap about is if you go to 75% of real estate agents' feed on social media, it's just sold, like that their assistant put together on a Canva template, or just listed, posts, or, like the first freeze is coming, here are things that you need to do to make sure your water pipe, like stuff like that. It doesn't get engagement. It doesn't land the way that you think it does, right? And so if you're passionate about food, make content about food, cooking. If you're passionate, like if you're super fit and you like to go to the gym a lot, make content about that. Like, it doesn't have to look the same way as other people, right? I lived in Denver for almost 10 years, and I watched that city explode. And when I came back to Kansas City, I kind of felt like we were on the precipice of something similar happening, not in the same way. Like, I don't feel like Denver grew in a very healthy way. But I'm so excited about what is happening to my hometown, right? And that comes through in my content because I am truly passionate about it. And so if you want to make content and get clients from it, find what you're passionate about and make content about that, and the rest will fall into place.
Awesome. All right, I lied. There is one more question. Are the Royals staying in Kansas City, Missouri?
It's funny. I just posted a reel today because Mayor Quentin Lucas at his State of the Union address last week said that the Royals were, that he guaranteed that a deal was going to get done in 2026 to keep the Royals in Kansas City and build a downtown ballpark. But he said the same thing about the Chiefs 2 years ago.
That's right.
The Chiefs were going to be in Kansas City, Missouri for generations to come. So I don't really take what he says at face value anymore. What I will say is this, is that Kansas has come out and said that the Star Bond deal is off the table. They missed the deadline. Clay County came out publicly and said that they're done negotiating with the Royals. They're not going to put it on the April ballot. That leaves either staying at the K, which I think they're going to have to do for longer. They're going to have to do some kind of extension because they don't have a deal done yet, and they should have. So it leaves either staying at the K and kind of developing around it, which they've made very clear that they don't want to do. Leaving the region altogether, which there are a lot of cities that, Nashville, Austin, Orlando, they all have committees in place to try and persuade teams to come. I really hope that doesn't happen. I think the Royals belong in Kansas City. I would love to see a downtown ballpark. I have been so clear since day one that baseball is meant to be downtown. Again, going back to referencing, I lived in Denver for 10 years, and I didn't even really like baseball but we would go to Rockies games all the time, even though they sucked. And the stadium was full all the time. And, the Rockies have never won a World Series, but they have way better attendance than the Royals do because it's so convenient to go to a game. You could be at a bar and be like, oh, there's a Rockies game. Tickets are cheap. Let's walk over and go to the game. And I think that that's what Sherman wants. He's made it very clear that he wants that experience for Kansas City and for the Royals. And so I think it just makes sense to put him downtown. Now, I did not sign off on the Crossroads site. I think that it was foolish for them to ever propose it there. It was a plan that they clearly did not have, they didn't think it out very well before they proposed it, and they saw what happened. And so I think the East Village still makes the most sense, man. It's like it's a sea of parking lots and just endless opportunity. If we built that up, we would have an epic downtown. And I would love that for Kansas City. So,
well, Kyle, I told you I'm not a big sports guy, but I know what the people want to hear. So you gave them what they were really looking for today.
Yeah. So I think they end up in downtown Kansas City. I've been saying it since the beginning. I think with Kansas and Clay County out of the way, it just kind of cleared the runway for the deal to get done. We just got to have the team and the government execute and then present a good plan to taxpayers who are going to be funding part of it, that they can get enough yes votes. So,
Kyle, thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet.